All right, hey guys, this is Casey Rollins here for my the first episode of this new podcast, and I apologize if I'm like shaky or whatever because I've never really done a podcast like this before, but I do hope that you guys enjoy it because I did want to try and do like some off the cuff stuff and kind of talk in more nuance than Mastodon and the Fediverse kind of allows, even with like 6,500 and however characters that you can put in a post nowadays. I do feel like just like kind of talking is probably better than just like typing some stuff out, because I just feel like it's a lot quicker. I can just like sit here, say stuff instead of like trying to like type things and fix all my typos and whatnot. But anyways, so I did put up the poll, and you guys voted. Actually, let me go back here. You guys voted in my poll talking about whether or not I should talk about censoring Gab or why oppose ethno states. So, 14 people voted. Thank you, 14 people, and 64% of you guys say I should talk about censoring Gab, and so that's what I'm gonna go do. And it's gonna be a little bit more than that because, you know, there have been some people apparently have been targeting me on the Fediverse. I know some people have been accusing me of being transphobic for some of my statements, even though I've multiple times I've said, you know, people should be nice to LGBT people. I don't agree with the lifestyle at all, but we should still be nice to them. That doesn't mean that we have to use whatever pronouns that they say it is, or pretend that we agree with their view of reality, but we should still be nice to them and be kind to them. Don't harass them, or like especially not on the basis of their gender identity or whatever. I think that's actually a good part of why a whole lot of people in the LGBT community actually end up like committing suicide or self-harm and whatnot, because they're already emotionally, mentally fragile, and so you don't want to go and damage them more than they've already been hurt before, or further than the state that they were already in. So you do have that, and also, you know, I don't want to do, and I definitely want to oppose anything that I think will or possibly lead to like something like suicide or more death or violence, because I mean, if you know me, you follow me a lot, I'm a very strongly pro-life person. So there's that. And yes, I was in a discussion earlier with some vegans or whatever. I do put human life above others, but we can talk about that a different time. The main topic that we were supposed to be talking about is Gab, and I want to talk about Gab in general before I specifically talk about censoring Gab. So, and just want to talk about my experience on Gab. So, I joined Gab now. Yeah, for perspective, in talking about my experience on Gab, I joined Gab like a while ago. I think it's coming up on 2 years. And this is like when I first joined indie social media. I joined Gab, I think it was in April of 2018, if I don't miss my guess. So most of the time I've been on indie social media, I've actually been on Gab. And so I've had like a lot of different conversations with people on the platform. And I will say this. So people accuse Gab of being like some sort of, like a hotbed of like alt-right Nazi stuff. That's kind of fair if you look at the content on the page. But then a lot of people in the media will say, you know, they're bad because they host hate speech, or, they cater to the alt-right. Well, that's not entirely accurate. So, at least I know from the beginning, from like when I first got on there, let's say like the first 2 months, the summer of 2018, Gab pretty much let anybody say whatever. And I do realize, yes, they've ratcheted up some of their censorship more recently, but it was a really cool place because it was, and I would talk about this with people on the platform, like, yo, this feels like the wild west of the internet. We can just run around saying whatever we want. We got leftists, we got rightists. We have all kinds of people going on there. At one time, there was somebody who stopped posting. People had accused the person of being some sort of New York Times journalist, but there was a leftist on there. We had like wonderful dialogues for several days. Gab doesn't banned liberal people. There are two liberal people that I follow. Well, I think they're progressive. I think they're two progressive people that I follow. One's fairly reasonable and one's not so much, but we have found middle ground before. And I think that's one reason why I like to talk with these people, because I feel like we can't be completely diametrically opposed on everything. There's got to be something that we agree with. And if we find some common ground, that might be a starting point on moving forward in dialogue. So, I would find mostly conservatives. There were some alt-right people that were on there too. And back then, it must be prefaced, I'm in college now. I was in high school back then, and I was homeschooled. So I had a whole lot of time on my hands. So I would just be like sitting around, just talking to these people on Gab for fun. And so I had a lot of time to do that. So like when I would find racists on there, I would go and try to confront them. Because one of the reasons I was on there is because Gab, people were like, oh, Gab is like, oh, it's just a bunch of like racist old white people. Well, I'm a young black dude who's a conservative. So, I mean, that alone kind of makes me a unicorn. But then to put me on Gab makes me like, a unicorn with a glowing tail. So I was like, well, let me, just hop on here and kind of be part of this underrepresented group, black conservatives, and, just kind of talk about whatever I want to talk about. And I'm not going to be pigeonholed into talking just about politics, although I love politics. I'm not going to be pigeonholed into talking just about politics. I'm going to talk about culture. I'm going to talk about the shows that I'm watching, the music that I listen to, all these kinds of things. Just whatever I'm interested in. And of course, since this is Gab, surely I'm not going to be censored for the stuff that I used to say, especially since it's fairly mainstream stuff compared to what you will see even now when you go on the timelines of Gab. So that was kind of my reason for joining. So I joined, and it was a pretty pleasant experience. It was interesting having dialogues with with like Southern sympathizers and like neo-Nazis, but as time grew on, I kind of didn't talk with him as much because those dialogues a lot of times didn't really seem to be very, very constructive at all. Because a lot of people would just dismiss me, because I'd be like, yo, I'm black. Which kind of speaks to a bit of the culture that you would see in Gab. There were kind of some people who were like Southern sympathizers that weren't like completely, that weren't terrible people to talk to. I think one in particular who I kind of missed because she's since decided to retire. It was Ayla Stewart. She's kind of an interesting person. Looking back, I think that her comments and things that she would say and put in her videos are a little bit worse than I thought that they were at the time. But I would have a dialogue with them. It was fun. But then I found like there's some great conservatives, really nice people. Like there's this community, and it's since been changed and co-opted. But it's called the Gab Fam, and I think if you actually search hashtag Gab Fam, let me see if I can find any posts. It says 0 people talking, so I guess it's basically dead. But there was this group called the Gab Fam in Gab, and basically what they would do is they would just be like, hey, hello, good morning, I hope you're having a wonderful day. Just saying like the nicest, kindest, positive things. Posting these probably Photoshop pictures of like green pastures and all these plants and flowers and like foxes and wildlife. Being, hello, I hope you're doing well. Have a wonderful day. And there are people like that in the Fediverse too. But I saw this firsthand in Gab, and I'm like, wow, this is really cool. We have some really nice people over here in Gab. But then, as I was just going my merry way, I found like some people that I would just like talk to every once in a while, and I was in a groove, and it was good. But then here's the problem. One problem I had was when he, I think it was around the time when he made the move, on the 4th of July last year. He made the move to the Fediverse. Now here's the thing. Let me back up a little bit. He had said before, Andrew Torba had said before, Gab is decentralized. And I'm like, how is it decentralized? You have one centralized server where you host everything, and you have hundreds of thousands of users on your site. How on earth is this decentralized? Like, this isn't Bitcoin. We're not using blockchains and multiple servers. We're talking about, like, basically 1 or 2 central servers. And I've seen some of his videos on his Twitter. He's just like, his server's like in a basement in his house. So Anyways, so that probably should have been a red flag right there, or at least a yellow one, saying, "Oh, it's decentralized," just kind of as a ploy to like gain people's favor, because everybody knows that decentralization is kind of like a hot topic right now. But so he said that, but it was like, okay, it's whatever. So, oh yeah, what happened? Oh yeah, so I was using Gab, and it was fine. Then the 4th of July came around, and they all of a sudden like the site like shut down. And I think this was a month before a month after there was like some sort of shooting or something, and one of the users was like a Gab user. So then of course CBS News and MSNBC and CNN and all the people made the rounds blasting Gab as they are wont to do whenever somebody from Gab commits an act of violence. Interesting how they didn't do that when there was a shooter who live streamed the shooting on Twitch, but I guess we'll leave that alone for now. We all know that in that case it's probably because the owner of Twitch is owned by the owner of the Washington Post. But anyways, so Gab shuts down, and I'm like, well, I wonder if it's because of like pressure, they lost their CDN or whatever, and they were, but on the page it's like, yo, we'll be back in like 2 days. So I'm like, okay, this is interesting. So they come back, and the interface is wildly different. Pretty much a lot of the people that I'd been talking to like prior to the switch to the new software, which I didn't even know like what was happening. Nobody did. Nobody knew what was happening, and a lot of people were just confused. They're like, how do I use this? What is going on? And there was just a lot of confusion. A lot of people just stopped using Gab after the update because they were so confused. Like, I'm 100% sure that at least half of the people that I was following at the time just like quit Gab because they're like, I don't know what you're doing with the site. You're taking it down for 2 days, and then you you don't tell anybody, and you bring it back up and it looks all weird, and you don't explain like what is going on at all. So, so that happened, and so I was like, well, this is not a good way. Like, this is bad from a marketing standpoint. This is not what you should be doing if you're trying to please your users. Shut the site down and then bring it back up, and it's like totally different. So it turns out that yes, I think Torba had like gone and said, yo, this is what's happening with the site. But he should have been a lot more upfront with it. He should have been like, yo, we're doing some changes, like make an announcement message when you log in. Just something simple. It's not that hard to be able to give announcements about things to people. And this is a guy who's like bad at marketing, just bad. He made an Android app for Gab, right? A while back. And I do remember like specifically talking about this. I was a heavy Reddit user at the time, and there were all these memes about Reddit saying, when you go to Reddit, you get like 5 pop-ups telling you to go use the app instead. The man goes and makes the Gab app and then fights with the admins, and then they end up taking the app down, right? From all of their, he gets in a fight with like big tech, with the Google Play and with the Apple App Store, and they end up taking the app down. So then he complains and he puts the app up on his site, but then he like ceases supporting the app. And I'm like, bro, why'd you do that? He was basically like, well, nobody was using the app and it wasn't worth it to us to develop it. And I'm like, well, nobody uses the app because nobody knows this existed. Look at Reddit. When you go to Reddit on a phone or something, even sometimes on a computer, I guess. I haven't been on Reddit in a while, so I don't know. I could be saying nonsense or something that's not true. But you go to Reddit on your phone, and it says, open the app. You get a message that fills up 1/4 of the screen that says, use the app, and there's a link. And that link goes to the Google Play Store. But hey, if you're Gab, you don't have to make it go to the Play Store. You can make it go to your own page. You can make it go, like, download the app directly. But, I mean, he didn't listen to any of that. So, I guess he was content to just be lazy and not develop an app. And that brings us to the 4th of July again of 2018, where he decides to switch over to Mastodon without telling anybody. So it turns out he had said something. But the problem is, on his account, he says so much that it's really easy for it to get lost in the TL, and apparently it didn't go viral or anything. So that was kind of a big reason as to why people didn't know what was happening. I think another reason too was that there was a Gab account, but I don't know if the Gab account that was on Gab had like specifically made an announcement about it. And actually, I don't think I knew about the official Gab account until after the switch. So I find out about the Fediverse actually through Gab, ironically. And it was pretty cool. I was like, yo, this is so cool because now we're going to have like all of these racists on Gab being exposed to all of these, far better viewpoints. And it's going to be they're going to be able to be shut down in the marketplace of ideas, and it's going to be proven how bad they are. They're going to be forced to like go and hide or whatever. And it's much better to just let bad ideas be shut down by good ideas than to try and stamp them out of the earth by punishing the users. Like, I think my favorite quote about censorship, comes from the classic movie Ben-Hur, where, there's this Roman dude, old guy, gray hair, is talking to another Roman guy who's a friend of the main character Ben-Hur. I for some reason I forget his name off the top of my head, but he looks at him and he says, "So how do you fight an idea?" And so the guy tells him, "Well, I'll tell you how with another idea." And I think that's really the only way, because in this is going to go into my Gab censorship thing. So here's the thing. You're not going to be able... Okay, let me put it like this. People like to frame banning Gab and censoring Gab as saying, oh, we're getting rid of the Nazi problem, or the neo-Nazi problem, the racist problem. We're getting rid of racists by pretending that they don't exist. That's not really how it works, because what you're basically saying by that is that we're just going to pretend that they don't exist and just ignore them, and that somehow fixes a problem. It doesn't. It presents two issues. One, it pushes them into an echo chamber into which they're just talking with people who agree with them, and nobody is ever challenging their viewpoint. And so what does that lead to? That leads to the big issue of you're basically just gonna just let them sit there continuing to be racist. Now, I'm not saying that it's your job to turn everybody who's racist into a non-racist, but what I'm saying is that if you actually are saying, yo, let's fight neo-Nazism, maybe you should do it by actually trying to convert, if you will, the people who actually have those extreme views. Because if you're saying, oh, these people are spewing angry, violent rhetoric, these people are inciting violence and whatnot. Well, if that's really what they're doing, should we really push them onto a platform that only they can see? Because then that makes the like, if it's really true that these people are like plotting, like, are telling people to do bad things and trying to harm people, you're not going to be able to find out about it because you've hidden it from your own view. And there's nobody around who's going to tell them to stop. So, I don't know. I just don't like the whole entire concept of, yo, all we have to do to solve racism is just to ignore the racists. No, that's not at all how it works. That's not that's not what Martin Luther King did. I know this. I'm saying this like a few days after Martin Luther King Day, and I know that racist on Gab is not nearly the same thing as like all of the people who were perpetrating the Jim Crow laws and like the White League and all the other stuff. But I am saying that if you're going to say you're going to fight racism, then maybe you should actually fight the racists instead of hiding from them. It's like saying, we have won the war. Now let us retreat. I guess that's what we do nowadays, right? When we go into the Middle East. but well, actually, no, just kidding. We never retreat in the Middle East. But I kind of lost my my train of thought there. But my point is that you cannot pretend to be to fight against racism if you're not actually going to fight the racism. You're just going to fight the users who are doing the actions. Trying to censor Gab basically and block them basically says, I'm fine with you being racist. Just don't let me see you being racist. That doesn't solve the core issue. Now, here's my proposed solution. So Gab doesn't. Now here's the thing. I haven't been on Gab in a while, and I probably never will be. My account still stands, but it redirects to my Quoto account. Also, big shout out to the Quoto admins. They're doing a wonderful job in fostering a really cool community. It's a very interesting feeling to be on a platform where like the admins actually like genuinely care about you, which is like the first thing I've ever experienced like that on social media ever. Like, Jack Dorsey's never gonna reach out to you telling you, like, asking you how you're doing. But Fremo and Rob, RGX Design, RG, they're really good dudes. Anyways, it's a little bit of a tangent. But here's the good solution. And what I was saying about my Gab account is it's still up. I don't use it, but my account's still up so that you can see all my old posts if you want to check out, all the old things I've said or whatever. But here is the real solution, I think, to Gab. So I think one issue that people say is, well, if you allow Gab to be in the marketplace of ideas, that's going to radicalize people who ordinarily wouldn't be racist. So, first of all, that's a little bit derogatory because that's basically saying that the common people aren't smart enough to not be racist and not to know that racism is bad. So, like if something is wrong, if all you have to do is be told like a few racist things and all of a sudden you're racist now. Like, I think it really exaggerates the gullibility of users, like just normies, who just sit around. And I know young people are malleable or whatever, but even then, like, you can't just, like, go up to them and just say, hey, Justin Bieber's good, and all of a sudden they like Justin Bieber. A lot of people still are gonna hate Justin Bieber even if you tell them that Justin Bieber's good. So, and I know, no, Justin Bieber's not the same as racism, that's not what I'm saying. Excuse me. But just let me move on here, I guess. So, here's the real solution. So, I know that people are concerned about, people are either concerned about radicalization or they just don't want to see a bunch of racist stuff in their feeds. And that's completely fine, and I completely understand that, because I personally don't want to see a whole lot of racism in my feed. Now, I don't really talk to racists anymore on, I don't really talk to racists anymore on Gab. I'm not on Gab, on Quota. Like, I can still reach out to people on Gab, but I just usually don't do it because I don't feel like it's worth my time. I actually have a life now. So I don't have time to run around just like arguing with people who disagree with me and probably aren't even going to listen to what I'm saying. With leftists, it's a little bit different. I feel like leftists are a lot more, it depends on the kind of leftist you're talking about, but in general, they're a lot more open than the common Southern sympathizer that you would find on Gab. I just typically don't talk about that. So I don't want racism in my home feed, generally speaking. It's just not good. It's not good for me. I don't think it's constructive. So I don't want that mess out. So I completely understand people not wanting to see that in the feed. Even, yes, I know you have to go out of your way to click the federated feed, but some people enjoy seeing the federated feed. They just don't want to see the racism. That's fine. And I do understand that some people are lazy and don't want to block, certain instances on their own. Or, as more is my case, is that, there are nice people on Gab or whatever. But if you're an admin, okay, from an admin's perspective, I completely understand. Because one day I do aspire to hosting an instance. And when I do, I don't want racist content on there. I probably will block Gab, even though there are some good Gabbers. I probably, whitelist certain instances. Just because I really want it to be kind of a safer space, I guess. If it's gonna be the kind of instance that I'm gonna invite other people to use. If it's just my own, I'm not gonna block any instance. But I think here's the real solution to fighting racism on Gab. If you don't want if you're worried about radicalization, you don't block Gab, because that will just insulate the problem. What you do is you silence them. And I learned about the option to silence users recently. I don't know why my nose is getting stuffed up all of a sudden, but I learned about this feature recently. You can silence an instance where they can see your stuff, but you can't see their stuff. And I feel like that's a really good way to approach it because, think about it. Are the racist far-right ideas that are very, very prevalent on, the big accounts on Gab, are they really, constructive? Are those the ideas that you want spread on your instance? Probably not. But are the ideas that are spread on your instance, which are probably not far right, probably not alt-right, neo-Nazi, Southern sympathizer content, do you want that content to be spread? Probably. So if you silence Gab users can still see your content. but you can't see their content. So thus, it'll expose them to ideas that are more mainstream and not as extreme or hate-filled. So this like really gives them, because Gab has a federated tab. When they hit that tab, they're going to see all of your posts if you haven't blocked them. So by you blocking them, you're hiding your own content from them. That's like kind of part of the issue. And while I don't like shutting some certain people out of the dialogue, I do think by now, like, people kind of know what Gab is about at this point. And I know that it's been exaggerated, you know, how bad they are. But in general, I think people get it. And that's not why I left Gab. Okay, so I guess, yeah, so I've said my piece about, like, what we should do about censoring Gab. Silence them, don't ban them. Because if you silence them, then they can still see your content. And your viewpoints will then challenge their viewpoints if they go to the federated tab and see the stuff that you post. Now let's go to, and also, by the way, my accounts, I have two accounts. I have an SFW account. No, I have N, like AN. I have N SFW account on mstdn.social, which I think is a largely Indian instance. It's got a cool community. I don't think it says tightly as Quoto. Quoto I really love. Quoto is QOTO.org. So if you go to those instances, or just search Real Casey Rollins, because you should be able to find me, on either of those instances. Those are the ones I use the most. My Quoto account, I will post edgy stuff. I will repost things that have, like, I don't know, explicit language in there or whatever. But if you don't like that kind of content, just follow me at mstdn.social and you'll be just fine. You could just continue to be a snowflake. So that's how you reach me, by the way. But let me go into why I left Gab. And maybe this will be a little bit controversial. So part of this, well, anyway, let me just talk about this. So I think it was last semester, because I was still here in college, and it was like in the middle. I think it was after one of the big breaks. I think it was after fall break or something. They had updated they'd updated their firewall. And by the way, this time I think Andrew Torba was following me, but I'm not 100% sure. So I do kind of have to hedge that statement when I go into this. So my I go to a Christian college. Okay, so the college had banned had like updated their firewall and banned Gab. And they didn't say why. They said it was that the site was questionable. I think part of it was probably due to a lot of the racist content on there, and also some of the bad press that it had gotten. Because I do know our college is predominantly white, but we've been making some really good strides to fight racism, and I don't think, honestly, I felt like from their own policies, they probably should have banned Gab like a year ago. Because of like the content that was on there. It wasn't, I don't think it was stuff that was like terribly bad enough for me to, it was definitely not bad enough for me to leave. And I wasn't following the people that was posting the worst stuff, obviously. But I was just surprised that it went unbanned for so long. But I was like, ooh, man, it took them long enough. And I thankfully I have like Brave or whatever. And there's like a tab on there. If you hit it, it says like Open Site Intor or whatever. And I also have the actual like browser for that. But I would use that, and it was cumbersome because Gab uses Cloudflare, which blocks Tor, so it wasn't easy to use it. And at this time, Quoto was my SFW account. So I would hop on back and forth. I would use Quoto on my phone and Gab on my laptop. That was kind of the setup I was working on. And I was like, I went and talked about it. There was a group on Gab called like Internet Censorship that had been part of for a while, and I was like, yo, this is a problem, I guess. I mean, Gab's been blocked on my college's firewall, and then I posted screenshots or whatever, just like showing, you know, what had happened. And so people had like, posted it and reposted it or whatever, and it got fairly viral for like the stuff that I post. Like I think it got like over 10 reposts, which, by the way, when I say reposts, I really mean like retweet. I used to use SoundCloud a lot, so when I say reposts, I just mean like, you know, boosting it in your own timeline or whatever. But yeah, so I had talked about how Gab had been blocked on my network, and A lot of people were like liking it. A lot of people were retweeting it or whatever. And I was like, I'm still gonna keep on using it. It's not gonna stop me. So, from that, I think that Andrew Torba probably saw that because it was like a week or 2 weeks after that, he started on what I call is hashtag Coomergate. So he went on his Twitter, which is like Get on Gab Twitter. And I know he's not the only one who uses it, but he's the main guy who uses it. He mainly used it to like post stuff about like trends.gab.com, which in my opinion is not a great site. There is terrible transparency as far as how stuff gets trending. It's a lot of alt-right stuff even on there. Or just like conspiracy theories, stuff from sites that I've never even heard of, so I don't even know if I can trust them. But yeah, so I feel like, I think Torba was following me at the time. He might have seen it because like a week or two later, he went on Twitter just like talking about, we block porn or whatever on our site. And I was like, well, that's interesting because I did come across like one post or so, I think earlier on when I was using it and I reported it because according to the rules, at least as I understood them at the time, you needed to like put some sort of content warning on there. At the time it was like mark it as NSFW. If you mark it as NSFW, it's within the rules. But it violates the rules if you don't mark it as such. And so I came across one person like a long time ago who had like posted some like weird GIF or whatever. And so I reported them. I didn't hear back about like what ended up happening to the user, and I don't even care at this point. I'm just bringing it in for context. So it was always my assumption that they had allowed that kind of content on there so long as it had the NSFW marker on there. And then after the move to Mastodon, had the CW thing on there. But then he was talking about, we ban pornography. Pornography is bad, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, I agree. I agree that porn is bad, but you were claiming that you had blocked it from the beginning. And even now, I go back on my YouTube or on my BitChute. I have a video called The Truth About Gab where I specifically talk about the rules that Gab holds. And this was like years ago. Like this was like way, way, way before any of this had happened. They only said they blocked illegal pornography. They didn't say they blocked all porn. So I'm like, this is kind of hypocritical for you to say that you've always done it. Now, I agree with this policy. I don't want porn on any instance that I'm using. But it's hypocritical for you to say, we've been blocking it all this time. When really you haven't been blocking it all this time at all. So I was like, well, that's just kind of weird for you to say stuff like that. That's blatantly untrue, and that I can verifiably prove that it's not true. I think I have a screenshot in my video of the old terms of service where they talk about that. But anyways, I'm like, okay, that's fine. But then he runs around, like calling people names, calling people who disagree with his policy, just like saying that they're completely in the wrong. And there was an argument. He sparked an argument big enough that Ben Shapiro had to, and I'm really glad for this. Ben Shapiro, he had to spend like 30 or 40 minutes hashing out his entire argument, and I have a post about it. If you search hashtag Coomergate, you'll find it. And actually, it's in my bio too. But if you go back into the arguments, there are these arguments that people were making against Gab, and for in defense of Gab and in defense of Torba, of their new policies, they're completely right. Because people are saying, oh no, you said you're for free speech, but now you're running around banning porn. Here's the problem with that argument. Speech is like words. So speech is written word, speech is spoken word, and you can't... Freedom of speech does not mean freedom of expression. People like to think that that's what it means, but it doesn't mean that. If you have a video, I'm just going to say, if you have a video depicting certain things happening in the video, and it's not part of some sort of overarching message, or maybe it's a message saying these acts are good and fine to do, and you shouldn't be ashamed of it or whatever. But in general, like, videos that don't have a lot of dialogue that has like a point or a message behind it, that's not speech. And a lot of the content that you guys are all mad that he's banning, this is not speech. If there are not words in it, it's probably not speech. It's probably expression. Now, freedom of expression, people were talking about how important freedom of expression is. It's fine to be able to express yourself, but I don't think freedom of expression should be defended in the same way that freedom of speech is. And here's an example. If I do not like you, okay, this is very rare because I try as hard as I can to like everyone, but if I do not like you, I should not be able to express that opinion by punching you in the face. Now, I could probably go up to you and say, I don't like you, and walk away. That's freedom of speech. But me going around and punching you in the face is not freedom of expression. Me running around with, firecrackers and lighters, running around in the streets, talking about, how bad you are or whatever, expressing my opinion that way, I think it's probably disorderly conduct. That's not freedom of speech. Me blowing up your house to demonstrate how much I do not like you is not freedom of speech. That is freedom of expression and, of course, violates multiple laws, but just going by freedom of expression versus freedom of speech, not all expression is speech, but all speech is expression. So that argument is just not valid because in Gab's anti-porn policies, to their credit, they're fine. If you just look at the policies, I'm okay with it. And if all he had done was enforce those policies, I'd be completely okay with that. And I probably would never have left. But here's my big problem is when he runs around denigrating people, calling people who disagree with him his enemies. That's not what I want out of a free speech platform. I just want somebody to be like, hey, here you go. Here's your platform. Say what you want. I don't want the leader of my platform running around insulting people or, being overly obtuse about his opinions. This guy randomly started talking about porn and wouldn't stop for 3 weeks. And then he just, like a switch, stopped. There was no rhyme or reason really as to, even his rationale. And that to the point where I was wondering, and this is when I really began contemplating leaving, is this guy even there? Is he mentally there? There might be something more to than just, I think one of the guys I like to watch on YouTube, Optimus, made a video about it, talking about how he was doing it all for clout, and he's completely right. He had talked about how good this was for business. Now we're getting traffic. Now we're getting clicks. So many people are paying attention to us now that I'm causing a ruckus and making the conservative community infight against themselves. Yay me. At least it's good for Gab.com, even if it's bad for the conservative movement because it's dividing us. I'm serious. That's basically Torba's messaging. It's like, I don't care. Anything to make Gab have more traffic, I'm fine with. And I can sympathize with him wanting to do that because as a small indie social network, there aren't a whole lot of ways to get people to even know about your social network. But, the more sensible people, I think the quartering kind of fell into the trap of even mentioning Gab on there because he has far more clout than Gab does. So that probably provided him with, Torba with a lot of promotion. But even looking at, Ben Shapiro, bigger people like him had the class to not mention Torba, which is good. So I think at this point, Gab's probably back down to wherever it was before in, user engagement. But I'm kind of digressing here. When you have an admin who is off the chain, who is just running around literally screaming and telling an entire age demographic how bad they are, and how they're evil, I'm sorry, but I don't think that you are there enough. I don't think you have enough mental faculties to run a social network with over 1 million users. Now, that said, I'm very grateful for the opportunity, and I made a post about this, and even Torba didn't repost it. I'm very grateful, and this stands to this day. I will always be grateful for what I have been given through Gab. Gab gave me a really good platform to talk about stuff with a whole bunch of users, gave me a voice that I wouldn't have been able to get anywhere else. I ended up with, I think, 575 followers when I left Gab, which I still haven't been able to hit yet anywhere else. So, I do have to, look at Torba and say thank you for providing me this avenue of speaking. As PewDiePie would put it, it's been real, but I'm out. I don't agree with how you're running the site, so I'm leaving. I'm not going to just sit here and pitch a fit. I'm not, because that'd be hypocritical for me, right? To sit on Gab talking about how bad it is. I'm just going to leave. And so, that's what I did. And I can no longer recommend Gab. Now, for the Gabbers who are there, I guess you're probably fine. But from what I'm hearing from some people on freespeechextremist.com, where like a lot of people who used to be on Gab left to go to, it sounds like there's kind of been some shady stuff as far as like why certain people have been banned. Because a few people have been banned. I know 1 or 2 people got banned because Microsoft Azure, like with your Azure project, CDN or whatever, had demanded Gab ban the people, or else they would lose the platform. So of course Gab wanted to keep their platform, so they banned them. But then later they moved on to other solutions that I think allowed them a little bit more leniency. But I've been hearing that they have been banning and censoring more people, especially people who are critical of their instance or telling people to leave. So I think the head admin at the instance I'm at now, Quoto, his name is Fremo. I think Dr. Fremo, right? Fremo had said, he was on Gab. He changed the name of his account to switch from Gab to Quoto or something like that. Boom! Instantly got banned. So, it's not a free speech platform. I don't think. There's not enough transparency as to why people get banned. Like, people want to know, hey, why does this person get banned? Why isn't this person allowed to say stuff? And Gab will not tell you anything. Torba will not tell you anything. You ask him point blank, why are these people not on the platform anymore? He will not tell you. And there's a certain level of transparency that you need in order to have a good relationship with your admin. The admins were telling me, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, all these people are reporting you for apparently being transphobic. Now, I don't agree with what they're saying. I don't think that you're transphobic, but I do think that you have a right to know that this is what people are saying about you, and these are the administration, and as far as an admin decision, we're taking none. And I'm assuming that if I had been breaking the rules, they would have sat me down and been like, yo, can you stop or whatever. They wouldn't have just banned me with no explanation. At least I don't think that they would. So that's that's what you want out of an admin, really. You want somebody who's going to be transparent and explain their rules and enforce their rules fairly and clearly. But in Gab is not that instant. So I'm going to tell anybody to go to Gab. Now, should you leave Gab? I personally do not see any benefit staying on Gab. And here's why. First of all, the software sucks. Instead of just pulling the Mastodon software, they made their own software. And the thing is, the software that they made is terrible. It's been broken since they switched. At least since I switched, from the time when they did it in 4th of July to the time when I left, which was I think was around December of 2019 or December or November of 2019, there were really bad issues. Like, people would try to repost stuff and it wouldn't work. There was supposed to be an editing feature, but it wouldn't even work half the time. And there was supposed to be a feature where you could see the old versions of the posts that you would edit. That has never worked for me, ever. So it's just a mess. The timelines don't allow you can't have live timelines. There are other minor gripes with it, but the software is just broken. You cannot see posts or accounts from instances that you should be able to see with, and these are accounts from instances where they haven't banned you, or you can't see their older posts or whatever. It's just a mess. It's just bad. Now, Alex Gleason has been doing some really good work. He forked Gab's code because they finally made the site open source, because they had to when they switched to the Fediverse. When they forked Mastodon's code. Alex Gleason has been doing some really good work forking Gab's code in order to make Spinster, which he's since left because of the harassment and the beating that he's taking, and he doesn't want the abuse directed at Spinster. He wants the abuse directed at himself, so that the Spinster can continue to thrive on its own, which it is doing. So he had to fork Gab's code in order to get Spinster working properly. He made his own version called Soapbox, which is way better. And I hope that a mainstream instance adopts it, because I haven't gotten a chance to use it because I never went to Spinster. I never went on Neenster. I was on GabFed until it got shut down. But I really admire what he's doing, and I would like a chance to try out the stuff, the software. But I wouldn't do it unless it was like a fairly free speech instance. And I already have 2 accounts. I'm not trying to run around and make 50 different accounts like Krenko did. Chris Krenko. If you've been on the Fediverse, you have definitely probably seen him around. But you know, it is what it is. Gab sucks. It will probably always suck. If you're not, from what I'm hearing, they're moving towards a place where they're only protecting the neo-Nazis and the far-right people. So if you're not part of that group, you might not be protected in the future. Now, I don't know if this is true. These are just rumors that I'm hearing, and I'm not on Gab, so I'm not seeing all the people that are getting banned, apparently. But I don't trust Torba as an admin. So I see zero benefit on staying on Gab, because the software is so bad. In comparison, you've got Mastodon, you've got Pleroma, you've got Misskey, you've got Soapbox now, you've got all of these different instances, and you can join an instance like Quoto that doesn't ban Gab, still talk with the same people that you talk with on Gab. Like, just go download your following list, and you can still talk with the same people. It's not really that big of a deal to leave Gab, honestly. Like, for me, I went on Quoto instantly, was just running around talking with my old Gab peeps. Because, you know, who's going to stop me from doing that? Nobody. So, I'm not going to tell you to leave Gab, but I would like, if you're on Gab, and you're going to stay on Gab, I would like to know why you're staying on Gab, instead of leaving. Now, maybe it's to preserve your followers. That's a fair reason. But I just, frankly, from my end, I don't see a lot of good reasons to stay on Gab. It's definitely an inferior experience to any Mastodon instance. Period. But anyways, that's all I have to say on that. I was planning on having a guest on. I was going to actually tape this earlier, but I couldn't get my guest on because our schedules didn't align right with the time when my roommate's not in here. so he's gonna come in for the next episode probably, where I talk about why I oppose ethnostasis. Oh man, this is gonna be a really controversial podcast. But anyways, thanks guys for enduring this. Sorry my nose got stuffed up like fairly early in the podcast for whatever reason. I would have left to go blow it, but that wouldn't be professional now, would it? Thanks guys. Like Joe Rogan experience, there's not going to be any intro music or outro music. I'm just going to say hi and bye. Oh, man. But seriously, guys, if you're listening, thank you. Whatever. Subscribe and whatnot.